What is up, guys? My name is Liv, and today we are going to be starting a brand new series here on the YouTube channel. We are going to be doing a zoo in Switzerland called the Swiss Alpine ABC Zoo. So the name is pretty self-explanatory. We are going to be creating a zoo with every single animal in Planet Zoo, starting at A and ending at Z. This is a zoo that I was inspired to do because I found myself not using a lot of the animals that are in the base game or using the same animals over and over again for my zoos. That is another reason why I did my wheel zoo series. If you haven't already, go ahead and watch the wheel zoo series too. That is where we create a zoo based on a random wheel generator. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start our aardvark habitat for the ABC Zoo. So like I said, we're going to be starting with the aardvark. So I'm going to go ahead and pop them in here. And while I'm setting up their very basic habitat, let's go ahead and talk about how this zoo series is going to go. The ABC Zoo series is going to be a lot different than our Wheel Zoo series. It's only going to be one animal per video, mainly doing this so that I can go a little bit more in depth with each habitat, starting with the aardvarks. I wanted to be able to go into more detail with my habitats. That way I could show you guys kind of the thought process and detail work that I do behind the scenes that I didn't really get to show as much in the Wheel Zoo series. I am also doing this zoo series in franchise mode. I don't know if that made this a little bit harder on myself, but I did start in franchise mode. I love franchise mode, and I didn't do my Wheel Zoo series in franchise mode, so there wasn't any restrictions, but I did want to get a franchise mode out there, and I thought this would be a great way to do it, get to show off each animal in Planet Zoo and get to play in franchise mode. But because we are in franchise mode, I did kind of have to put a pretty basic aardvark setup just to start so that we could get some money. So I ran this a little bit, and then once we had $6,000 to play with, I went ahead and put the aardvarks in the trade center, and we got to work on the actual aardvark habitat. I knew kind of a general layout that I wanted for the aardvark habitat. I wanted it to be viewable by the path, but I wanted it to be very closed off because aardvarks are very stressed out, anxious animals. So I didn't want them to have any problems with their stress levels, with their anxiety, especially since we are in franchise mode. I want happy and healthy animals all throughout the zoo. So because it was going to be so closed off, I also wanted there to be a little shop next to the aardvark habitat with foods and drinks. Because we're in Switzerland, it snows a lot throughout this video. So here is a little clip that I took of the snow in Switzerland. It's very beautiful. But now that I have a general layout for the habitat, at least a starting point, it was time to start the actual shop. Now, I messed around with a lot of different materials for these buildings, for both the habitat and for the shop. First, I thought I was gonna make it like a little bit different wood textures, but it just didn't look how I was imagining it in my head. So I do end up changing it to the conservation wood instead. But right now, I just wanted it to be like a basic layout for the shop, just Pip Shop water and Missy Good food. And then that little area where the guests can actually view the aardvark habitat from inside. While I was building the shop, we actually did run out of money. So again, because we are in franchise mode, I did have to take out a loan. That is my first loan in the series. Let's see how many loans I end up taking by the end of it. But here is where I switched everything to that conservation wood instead. And this is more of the general layout that I did moving forward. We do end up making the aardvark habitat a little bit bigger just because they were having some issues with the mobility requirements. After I got the null barrier set up for the aardvarks, it was time to finish off this shop. So I kind of wanted it to be more of a modern looking feel. This is something that I don't usually show in my Wheel Zoo series, but whenever I'm trying to roof a shop or building in general, I will quite literally lay out every single roof that I have access to at that moment, and I'll just pick away which roofs are gonna work for the building. For this build, I chose the white metal roof. I think it paired very well with the conservation wood. Because we were going for more of a modern look, I wanted this part of the habitat to be kind of closed off and then kind of like a backstage area for the guests to get in. That backstage area is not going to be viewable from the guests. There will be backstage areas in the zoo that will be viewable from guests because we are doing it in franchise mode. This one just wasn't one that I wanted it to be too viewable. I ended up lining this building with these stone pillars because I just thought it was looking too bland. This is where we actually do end up expanding the habitat. It ends up expanding once more after this as well. But we're getting that shelter in for the aardvarks. I did want the guests to be able to look into the shelter, but again, I didn't really want them to see anything going on backstage. So I left it a little bit open, but it's pretty much cut off. They can't see too much from what we allow them to see. Even though this entire habitat will have one-way glass, I did want to keep everything private for the aardvarks. That way there is no situations where they could get stressed out. So there I am just adding the glass. Typically I like to use one-way glass habitat barriers instead of the actual building pieces one-way glass, but for this habitat, since it was more at a curve, I just thought it would be easier to put those building pieces in instead. For the actual shelter, just to make it a little bit more realistic, we put a flooring down for the aardvarks, and then I did need a water filter because I wanted to add a really shallow pond in here. I just don't really like the way that the water bowls and everything looks, so a little pond will do for them. They're not big swimmers, but it will at least be some water they can access. This is that point where I realized we needed to add more to the habitat, give them more space, because once I got the aardvarks in, they were still super upset with their traversable space. So I just added that little portion, and it actually worked out because I was able to add a lot more foliage and a lot more enrichment items back there. Now that we have pretty much everything needed for the aardvarks, it was time to start laying down some rock work, laying down some foliage. Right here by this little pond, I wanted them to be able to kind of go up to the indoor viewing windows, and that way guests could get more of a up close and personal viewing of the aardvarks. I also added their food right next to the outdoor viewing windows for the same reason, so that the guests could get a more up close and personal viewing. I did add a burrow there, but that burrow does not stay. It does end up going later in the video because the aardvarks stayed in that burrow the entire time. I might end up adding an animal that does require a burrow later on with a burrow viewing, but for the aardvarks, I think that their shelter works just fine. After adding a few enrichment items down, it was time to start decorating the outside of the habitat. So again, because we're in franchise mode, it's gonna work a little bit different than sandbox mode. We do actually have to educate our guests on what animal is inside the habitat. So I put a few little aardvark signs up, just letting them know what animal was in here. And then it was time for the foliage work. So again, I didn't want to have to expand this habitat again, so I went a little bit light with the foliage work. I would have wanted to do a lot more foliage work in their habitat, but again, it's franchise mode and I wanted their traversable space to be to their liking. I mentioned it earlier, but because we're in Switzerland, there was a lot of issues with it snowing. A lot of the A-letter animals are going to be from Africa, so these heaters are going to be a necessity in a lot of the habitats that we're going to be doing going forward. That's where I got rid of the burrow, and then I just put a few more foliage down, a few more little trees, little palms, just to kind of spice it up. Now it was time to work on the shop. So just to make it a little bit more realistic, I put a floor down, got rid of those curbs on the path so that you can't see how chaotic it is, and kind of matched it a little bit closer to what the outdoor path looked like. I added a few decorations to the outside of the shop. Because we had Missy Good and Pip Shot water, I wanted to add a few signs so that they knew what was inside. With that being said though, here is our aardvark habitat. Thank you guys guys so much for watching. I really enjoyed the start of this habitat and the start of this zoo. I'm really excited to start moving down to Africa and doing all the other A letter animals, and even going all the way down to, I think it's W. I don't think we have an animal with a Z yet, even though we do have zebras. They're plain zebras, so they don't technically count. But I'm excited to go all the way through the alphabet with this zoo, and let me know what you guys think about this series idea down below. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!